Welcome to World at Work TV. I'm Alison Avalos, and I'm joined today by Haig, Nalbantian and Tauseef Rahman from Mercer to talk about a career rewards approach and linking that to organizational design and pay. Thanks for joining us for our two-part series. Gentlemen, start us off by talking a little bit about what we mean by a career rewards approach.
Yeah, career rewards are essentially what happen to employees over time in an organization. So clearly elements of career advancement, learning, mobility, the ability to work with different people and different customer sets. All of these things that have no meaning at a point in time but reflect a process by which people grow and develop and perform over time is what we call career rewards. And the reason they're important is they represent a strategic element of rewards that organizations can actually use to help ensure they secure the right people and motivate them to perform well by adjusting and deliberately managing that trajectory of growth and development, and yes, pay over time. And why does it matter? It's because many organizations still rely heavily on homegrown talent. They get more value from the employees who have been there some period of time, who understand the company way of doing things, who have institutional knowledge, networks, relationship with customers, things that aren't transportable elsewhere, that create value within the firm. So if that tenure drives value, you need a way to value tenured employees to get them to come and stay with you. And short of just paying people for tenure, which was kind of the old style industrial system, more organizations today use the career structure and opportunities to grow over time as the method by which they secure that tenured talent. So it can be very strategic. And in the example we gave, showed a regional branch bank where we actually modeled the running record of branch level performance, profitability, customer retention, and growth. And in that organization in particular, the single biggest predictor of successful outcomes was average tenure of employees in the frontline jobs. Company like that needs to manage career rewards in a strategic way to drive up that tenure and make sure people are productive and not just hanging around. We won't generalize from that because there are differences in organizations, but it does make the point that it all is rooted in what the business needs and how important homegrown experience is to driving performance.
Do you want to give the baseball example, Haig?
Well, yeah, so
to illustrate
I'm glad you mentioned that. So I'm an old Yankee fan, still a Yankee fan. Happy days for us these days. But we have a player on our payroll who's being paid $21 million this year, Alex Rodriguez, and he's not even on the roster. He was let go last year because the organization felt that his diminished performance and is holding a slot that could otherwise be used by up-and-coming talent coming from the minors to the major leagues, at this point didn't make it worthwhile to keep him on. So they're willing to pay him $21 million not to show up. Now, if you take a pay-to-market competitiveness point of view, you're going to say, he's overpaid, what a terrible deal they made. If you take a pay-for-performance point of view, which a lot of board practitioners, we do that, you'll also say there's zero performance, so that clearly was a botched contract. But if you take the career view, which I think the Yankees have, I mean, they don't like paying $21 million to someone who's not there, but they're not sweating it. And the reason for that is they recognize that this was the contract they needed in order to secure Alex Rodriguez during his prime. So in essence, it's economic because they paid him less than he was worth early in the career when he was really performing, helped take him to the World Series. The only way to make that work is they're paying him more than he's worth later in the career. So that trajectory was managed very deliberately. They did their calculations. Did they do it perfectly? Who am I to say? Who are we to know? But their thought process reflected an understanding that the labor market is not a spot market for skilled, particularly for skilled labor. Organizations run internal labor markets, and you have that ability to manage pay, career advancement over time in a very strategic way to meet your business needs, and I think the Yankees would say they did that.
Yeah. It's sometimes odd to think about organizations who talk about the employee value proposition and stay with us, grow with us, you'll have a career with us. But when it comes to looking at rewards and other things that are in a way exchanged for service within an organization, the benchmarking is always about the here and now, right? What's that aging percent that we use to take survey data that was released in September 1 to age it to January 1, right? But then an hour later, they'll be in a meeting talking about the career with us and the value you'll bring to the organization over time. So that disconnect is a lot of the reason why we wanted to share what we did, for the reasons Haig had just mentioned about career awards are important, but there's such a predominant focus on point-in-time benchmarking.
So what's the relationship between the organizational structure design and a career rewards approach?
The relationship between organization design and career awards has to do with how people move through the organization. So if you have an organization, let's take a pyramid, for example. You have a lot of people at the bottom, fewer people, the next level up, fewer people, fewer people. What you end up having is, in order to maintain that pyramid, you have lower probabilities of moving ahead. Otherwise, you probably have something more of like a block, where people just continue to move up through the organization. Not a good or bad thing, right? But if you look at the example that we just given in terms of a pyramid versus a block, the return to promotion, the value that you get from progressing should be different depending on whether you have a decreasing likelihood of promotion in the case of a pyramid, or no reduction in your likelihood to advance in the case of a block-shaped organization. So if you think about organizations that have a pyramid-like organization, to calibrate career awards, you'd want it such that the return to lower promotion rates, higher and higher you go, is compensated for. Not everyone will make it to the top, but if you do, you're paid for it, right? Similarly, and perhaps conversely, if everyone's moving up through the organization, it doesn't necessarily make sense to treat them as if it's this thing that doesn't ever happen, and we need to compare it to our the market, which might be shaped differently. So I think that's the important piece as it comes to linking career rewards to organization design.
I think the other element of it is that the organizational design actually conveys some of the career milestones that are so instrumental to driving rewards. So a lot of organizations at a certain period of time, kind of 90s, early 2000s, went to broadbanding. They delayered, they contracted levels. That was for administrative simplicity, to give them more flexibility around pay at any level, and not to be hamstrung by these many career levels. So from that perspective, you can understand the logic and understand why. But we find when we do statistical modeling of the drivers of turnover, the decision to stay or leave, the actual decision, not what people tell you, but how they vote with their feet, more often than not, if an organization is reasonably competitive on pay, within 10% plus or minus, the career factors are going to dominate in predicting who stays and leaves. So if I'm promoted, if I have a lateral move, if my supervisor changes or I get to work with a different group, those are much more predictive of whether I'm going to stay with the organization or leave. If you've gotten rid of those career, the organizational levels that are clear markers of progress. A person can say, I just moved up from this role to this role. I'm now level 4 instead of level 3. You basically remove the ability to use the career dynamic as part of your reward structure. People don't go around telling each other their pay for the most part. Most organizations we know don't put Tauseef's pay increases versus Haig's lack of pay increase on the company site, right? It's not there. The visible markers are the career movement, and organizational design has a lot to do with what those career dynamics look like. And we'll talk a little bit more about the different models to use that organizational design, but you start with the basic observation that design is very influential to the reward signals that companies give.
I'd add the follow-on or takeaway from that is that it's very easy to make haphazard changes to organization design, delayering, whatever it might be, without really considering the impact it'll have on career rewards and drivers of retention in an organization. You might think you're doing something good, but you're doing exactly the opposite.
Thank you. Join us for part 2 of our series, where we'll talk a little bit about the different models used in a career rewards approach. For World at Work TV, I'm Alison Avalos.